Hey guys, it's Nick here. So I want to talk about my archery hunting plans for this year. I've been a gun hunter for a long time, but this is my first year that I'll actually be archery hunting. It's been something I've been planning on for the last few years, but things have been busy, and I actually took hunter ed so long ago that in our state here in New Hampshire, back then they used to have a separate archery hunting safety certification. So I had to retake hunter ed, which is a digression I'm not going to go down, but I didn't really see why that was necessary because honestly, the new course is almost exactly like the old firearms course used to be, with like a chapter or two on archery, a couple questions on the test, and you never actually have to fire a bow, handle a bow. You basically have to be able to give the basic parts of an arrow. Which I will give a quick breakdown on the gear. But before I do that, I guess the reason why, for me, it's appealing to get into archery, even though I had to go through that process again, is that here for firearms, in most of the state, we only get one deer a year. In the southeast, there are actually some units where you can buy some additional doe tags, but that's not where we live. And the season's much longer. So with archery, it goes from September 15th to December 15th. So you get a 3-month season. The gun season is only a little over a month, and there's a lot of pressure at that point. Muzzleloader is a good way you can extend your season too. That gives me like an extra 9 days before firearms opens. But this way I can be in the woods like almost 2 months before the first gun hunters are going after deer. And deer is not the only thing I hunt. It's a similar situation with turkey. So here in the fall, we get I think it's like a week or just over a week for turkey with shotgun. It's the same 3-month season as it is for deer with turkey. And it's an extra tag. So for deer, I can take either sex during that 3-month season. We only get a couple of days during firearms, depending on where you are in the state. Some areas you only get to take 1 buck a year. Where I am, it's usually like 2 or 3 days a year you're allowed to harvest a doe by firearms. So it opens up your options if you're a meat hunter. I got this at a pawn shop 3 or 4 years ago. It's a bear, which is a good name, but it's a bear pledge. They don't even make this particular one anymore. I forget if it's the Cruiser or what the model is now that's like the entry level, but it's way entry level. But it's a decent enough bow. It's consistent. The sight sucked. The sight is like this cheapy plastic sight that literally would fall off from the vibration of taking a shot. So I went to a local archery shop and got this 5-pin from Fuse Archery, which was $150. The bow a few years ago at the pawn shop. It was still new in the cardboard. Never been used, but it was $120. So that's pretty cheap. If you're just getting into archery hunting or just getting into hunting, archery equipment is... you could spend more getting into archery equipment than you could like a decent rifle, like the Ruger American, like a decent entry-level rifle, like a Ruger American. With glass, I think you can get into that for like $700, $800. A decent bow package could be as much or more. But depending on where you live, you might actually be able to harvest more animals using a bow. So I'll show you guys. This is a mechanical release. You don't shoot compound bows with fingers. Maybe somebody does, but it's not typical. You guys might shoot traditional like recurve bows with that. With these modern compound bows, typically there's this loop on here, and then you've got your mechanical release. I am going to draw this. I'm not going to dry fire it unless something catastrophic happens here. And I got to work on my form. It's a 70-pound draw weight, which you don't necessarily need to go quite that heavy for deer. I'm going to slowly ease off this, which is tough because those cams really fight. You've got what they call the whisker biscuit here. So your arrow knocks on right here in the middle of your little loop. Then your arrow sits in the Whisker Biscuit, which is really the name that, I don't know if there's an official name, but everybody calls it Whisker Biscuit. And then you've got this peephole, so I'm not going to draw it again because that was kind of taxing. But when you draw the bow, this ring will flip up and form a peep sight, like the rear peep sight on a rifle. Actually, anybody who's familiar with like an M1 or an AR style sight, same thing. And then you align that with your pins, which obviously it's in reverse. And you set those pins based on your what range you're shooting at to compensate for your drop. This one, obviously guys, I say obviously, but if you're new, you're not necessarily going to know. This is a broadhead from Newland Archery, Mayfield. I'm not going to say, I ordered a couple different types of broadheads. I need to do more research. I don't know, it's got a big conical point. Got these ones that are like a little bit smaller. I think this is like a 7/8 broadhead with what they call it, I don't know how well it shows in the video, but it's like more of a chisel point. Those are fixed. I'm not going to do a deep dive on archery equipment, but with your broadheads that you're going to use for hunting, you can have either fixed, which is like this, where it's just like scalpel blades that are permanently out. They also have mechanicals that are kind of almost like a cat's paw. They're contracted and then they release when they hit the animal. But, you know, for your practice, you're going to want to... Broadheads are not cheap. They're going to dull really quick in a target. So, like a field point, you might call it. It's just a practice tip. So that's kind of it on the equipment, guys. Obviously, it's not a top-end bow package. I really want to get good at archery hunting before I go sinking a bunch of money into equipment. And honestly, gun hunting for whitetails, I'm not a big tree stand guy. This is the first year I've also purchased a tree stand. I'm going to try to get up sometime in May or June, well before the season. But there are guys who will stock animals with bows on the ground. I'm sure you can find some hunting media of people doing that on deer or black bear. It's really hard to do. Your effective range on a bow, in some videos you're going to watch online, people are going to be doing 40, 50 yard shots and talking about that like it's easy. It's really not. I've practiced quite a bit with this one, and I can make reasonably consistent shots at like 40 yards, but that's really my outer limit. 30 is where I'm like much more comfortable. And they say that under the stress of like an actual hunting situation, you probably want to take your practice distance and almost cut it in half. So if you're getting good on a target at 50 yards, you might want to hold your hunting distance to 25 or 30 yards. And it's really hard to sneak up on a deer that close. It's hard to sneak up within 100 or 150 yards to get a rifle shot. So, I don't know, guys. Maybe drop some comments. I'm curious to hear if you're new to archery hunting, maybe things you learned in the first year or two, or like maybe what the hunting rules are in your part of the country. I know I listen to quite a bit of hunting media, and I know in some of the southern states, or states where they have higher deer densities, you can take 4, 5, 6 deer a year without even needing to pay for multiple tags. Up here in New Hampshire, it's a different story, and I know a lot of the other northern tier states where there are quite a few deer hunters, they do just have to balance out the population and the demand for hunting deer. So I can't complain, but if you're in Maine, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Michigan, you know, it's you're not necessarily going to be taking several deer a year. So thanks, guys. Consider liking and subscribing to the channel.